The panel, the discussion, an objective and impartial view of the issues of interest to you. Nation Beat is on now.
Hello and welcome to Nation Beat. I am your host, Claudia Monlouis. Today we are going to engage in a very interesting and important discussion as the Department of Physical Development and Urban Renewal is set to embark on a very important cleanup and removal exercise. To help us do so, we have in our midst the Chief Physical Planning Officer and Executive Secretary of the Development Control Authority, Ms. Karen Augustine, Mr. Kurt Satney, the Attorney at Law and Legal Officer with the department. We also have Mr. Werner Hausen of the DCA and Mr. Avery Trim, Building Officer at the Department of Physical Development. Welcome to the studios of the GIS. It is always a pleasure to have the experts on hand to engage and enlighten the citizenry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
To begin, let us examine for the benefit of the citizenry out there, our viewers, the mandate of the department and all, or should I say departments, because we have physical development and urban renewal and the DCA as well, the mandate, the role, and how does what the work that you do contribute to the development of the country.
Thank you very much. We at the Development Control Authority, we fall underneath the Department of Physical Development and Urban Renewal. The DCA in itself, as it's known, is a statutory body. We are guided by the Physical Planning and Development Act. And through this act, we have our mandate, which allows us to undertake the monitoring and enforcement of land development regulations. These are guiding instruments that we use in our day-to-day activities and allow us or give us the power to undertake development across St. Lucia or to facilitate development across St. Lucia. It's a very important mandate and it has quite a bit of responsibilities that go with it. And to facilitate and having these responsibilities enacted, we have a very strong team of professionals. We are composed of both planning officers, building officers, and we also have a legal unit that provides support. So with us today, we have representatives from each of these units, the planning officers in the person of Mr. Hausen and Mr. Avery Trim for the building officers, and Mr. Kurt Satney, the legal officer, who gives us all our legal support. So our mandates is very extensive, and with the support of the staff, we are able to execute our responsibilities. We are also given guidance by a board. It's called the Board of the Development Control Authority. This is a board that is comprised of representatives of various government agencies as well as general members of the public. So this board meets regularly, and with the guidance and direction from the board, the decisions are taken for which the staff are responsible to execute.
Well, that was a very, very comprehensive response, and I appreciate that, Ms. Augustine. Is there any other role that needs to be highlighted? Any member of our panel here can contribute that was not covered in Ms. Trim's explanation of the role of the department before we proceed to the removal campaign itself? Is there anything you would like to add to that?
Maybe we can speak a little bit about enforcement. One of the key activities that fall underneath the responsibilities of the DCA is enforcement, and that too falls within the provisions of the legislation. With that activity, we are hoping that the cleanup campaign falls underneath that provision, and using that provision, we will engage in various steps to realize the cleanup activities. So I will let the officers explain a little bit more of what the cleanup activities, the processes that we are going through for these cleanup activities, and how the general public will be responsible, what their own response is, and what our activity involves.
Well, absolutely. Mr. Hausen, can we begin with you as we peel the layers of the full scope of the problem that the department has firstly identified and now seeks to address?
Well, with respect to the issues we face with, is some of the challenges we've been facing is some of you get a lot of high incidents of informal and unauthorized development, and we notice that it occurs quite a bit within the Castries to the Grosley corridor, the northern corridor, and some of it was mainly attributed to persons who have sought to get a new means of livelihood, and in so doing, it somewhat remained, and some persons kept it. And we're not about destroying or stopping livelihoods, but there are quite a bit of safety hazards that's attributed to the way and the manner in which persons have gone about setting up those things within that corridor. And so with so doing, we believe that one of the best things to do is to inform members of the public and let them know first and foremost that it's not the drive that we have is not to retard or to do any harm to livelihoods, but to ensure that the areas are safe for residents, for people themselves, even the persons doing the activity. So that's one of the major issues that we face with in this area.
I'm happy you mentioned that. And is this sort of initiative, Mr. Satmi, usually comes with a certain level of pushback from the public? So can you give us the legal context for the departments and the Department of Physical Development and Urban Renewal and the DCA having the authority to undertake such actions?
Well, thank you for your question, Claudia. In St. Lucia, land development is governed by the Physical Planning and Development Act, and this is a law which governs all development in the country. Within the Act speaks of what land development is, and that entails a lot. That entails a lot of different activities, including what Mr. Housen spoke about, persons erecting structures along the roadsides, for example. In the Act, we are given the mandate also, which Mr. Gussin alluded to earlier, to keep the amenity around St. Lucia in good standing, and to ensure that we protect public safety and to keep the public at large safe in all activities related to land development. Under the Act, we have the authority to conduct this activity, which we call a cleanup campaign, to protect the road reserve mainly this time around, which is part of the assets of the state. The road reserve covers the roadway. It covers the sidewalks, the drainage, where the utilities are located. The example where the electricity poles are. So all of these are publicly owned, state-owned assets, which the development regulations protects. So the drive that we're on here is governed by the Act. We are just ensuring that we are following what the Act asks us to do, and we are conducting this activity accordingly.
I know that the department is, as Mr. Gustin indicated, consists of various professionals, and we have in our midst Mr. Avery Trim, building officer. Can you speak to your role in the department?
Thank you. The building officer is one that welcomes the public, addresses concerns of the public, tries to assist the public in providing a smooth way for them to carry out the development. The building officer will receive applications for minor developments to include residential developments, walls, signs, various developments, minor developments that persons may want to undertake. The building officer also will appraise the applications. That is, once it's received at the counter, it is for a certain area that the building officer in a zone, if it's within the zone, they will go and look at the site. They would assess the application. The building officer will also make a presentation at committee meetings on that particular application, where a committee meets to address the concerns or to address the application. Also, the building officer is very important in going out into the community on a day-to-day basis to observe the various developments being undertaken, whether given permission or unauthorized developments that may come in various areas in St. Lucia, as well as complaints being made by the public on persons carrying out development which they perceive to be unauthorized or permission was not granted, to include landowners who do have property around and observe something is being undertaken on their property, whether it be clearing or whatever it is, that the building officer would go out and do the inspections. The building officer is very, very, very key in the aspect of the Physical and Planning and Development Act to be able to present to the DCA the findings that they get, the investigations that they undertake, to give some sort of information where the DCA would give guidance and contact whoever it is, the developer or the complainant or the person, the offender, to be able to get some information and to guide them as to telling them or advising them that what they're doing can be a hazard to the environment, to the community, or even to themselves. When persons build, after permission is given to them, the building officer is responsible for going out and monitoring that development to be able to ascertain that that development is within the capacity that it has been applied for, as well as to be able to give guidance. And if the person deviates, the building officer will have to make some sort of investigation and also present to the DCA concerns that they face with that particular development when it comes to the environment of the community. In that deviation, the person may have to make a resubmission. And then once the development goes according to the approval granted, the final thing is that the building officer will, under the guidance of the DCA, issue the person with a completion certificate, which would say that that development was done according to the permission that was given to them.
How would you describe this process? Is it long and tedious as some sections of the public would perceive it to be, or is it quite practical and can be done within a reasonable length of time?
This process is a wonderful process. It's a very, very, very detailed process, and the building officers have no issues. They work together, and we're able to try to help persons. And the important thing is the communication, to be able to give the public adequate information so that they will not create hazards for themselves in the future. It's not something that is so demanding, but it can be tedious when the developers or the designers do not adequately meet the requirements. So we have to go after them and ask them, have you done this? Have you addressed that? To be able to get your final permission so that you can carry out your development. So it's a wonderful process. And we encourage the public to come in and to have discussions with us so that we can give some proper advice, proper guidance in that regard. Thank you.
Mr. Augustine, at what point should a member of the public who is deciding to embark on an initiative of building approach the Department of Physical Planning? Is it when they're done? Is it at the point of discussion very early on that they should approach the department? Is it when they already have their plans in hand?
It's always advisable to visit the department from your very initial stage when you're thinking about doing a project.
Yes.
You're just thinking about it. The authority has put in various approaches to allow persons to get approval at different stages. So at the very conceptual stage, a developer wants to undertake a development. He's saying, okay, well, I think I want to put up maybe a multifamily housing development. I want to put up apartments on a particular lot. First thing, I always recommend come to visit the DCA. Come and have a conversation with us. We are open during regular working hours. We have a counter staff that is accessible to the public, and they are very much trained in providing the information on any type of application that we process. We also have technical staff that are also available to members of the public to provide guidance. But I always advise persons, if you are intending to undertake a development, before you even speak to your designer, come to the DCA. Come and find out what the necessary guidance you need before you even approach a designer. What are the standards? What are the land development regulations? What are even from the other ministries, the other support agencies, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture. Before you even go to these other agencies, come to the DCA. We are best placed to provide you with the guidance before you can even engage a designer to do your project. Through our guidance, we will advise on the nature of your project. So as I mentioned, if it's a residential development, if it's a commercial development, even the hotels have to get permission from the DCA. So you're putting up a hotel, you get permission from the DCA, you apply to the DCA. The DCA will always advise you to also visit Ministry of Health, the Environmental Health Department, which looks at your waste management, including your septic tanks, your drainage, etc., as well as the other departments that provide support to the DCA. So once you've come in, we have what is called a checklist, and that checklist tells you all the different agencies that are involved, as well as the different plans you are required to produce if you are to apply to the DCA.
Wonderful. Yes.
What happens, Mr. Satin, if I do not come in because I am not furnished with sufficient information and education, or I was fearful of coming in, but at the end of the day, I did not come in and I went ahead with my structure. Perhaps I wanted to put a structure on the road reserve. So what are the consequences? Am I faced with something punitive immediately, or is there room for goodwill?
Okay, thank you. There are several things that could go wrong if you do not get the proper guidance. First of all, in the road reserve, if you build anything there, that is against the law. So you've basically infracted on the law there. Secondly, if you're building a residential building on your property, you have your piece of land and you're building on there without any DCA guidance or approval, you may not comply with the regulations. You may not comply with the law. For example, you may build too close to your boundary. That is called being infringing on the setbacks. Setbacks are an area from your boundary within which there must be no construction, no development. This is to allow for air circulation around. This is to allow for the emergency services, should they be needed in any time, that they are able to access your home in order to assist. So all of these things, DCA would be giving you guidance on. If you do not comply with DCA, your structure may be not structurally sound. It may have an issue later on in life and cause some health and safety hazard. You may not get the proper approval for your waste disposal, which Mr. Augustine spoke about earlier. So there are so many different things, not just with the law, that can be hazardous if you do not receive guidance from us. And worst of all, you now have infringed the law. You have broken the law. You have not complied with the law, which the law says you must apply to the DCA for any development in the country. There are those that the DCA exempts, according to the law exempts, but you wouldn't even know that if you haven't come in for the guidance. And it is against the law to build without DCA approval. So you've now caused the DCA, the building officers who are responsible for the zones, to label your development as unauthorized. Once that happens, they conduct their investigations, find out whether you have DCA approval, find out even whether you've built on your own property. because the land register may not likely be in your name. Who knows? All of these things, they conduct their investigations, they put together a file, which is then handed over to the legal unit. With the legal unit, we now look through the file to ascertain the evidence. We conduct site visits on the property to see what the infractions really are. And we are armed with the law to bring the matter to court. So we can, there are various provisions which can either cause us to take the matter to the magistrate's court, and you may be fined for that unauthorized development. And we also have the authority to take you to the High Court for an injunction, which will stop you from continuing your development. The building officers have the authority also to place upon your property a stop and enforcement notice. What that does is, during construction, if you have an unauthorized development, that notice tells you to stop immediately, visit the DCA, and let's see how we can regularize that development. It also, if it is something that can't be regularized, it causes you to now be enforced to remove whatever you've done and bring the property back to what it was before you started your infraction. So the starting point, I will reiterate always, is to come to the DCA. They are very welcoming. They encourage everyone to come in and find out what is needed for your development, whether it's your residential, whether it's a wall, anything you're building. Come and find out what are the requirements. And that way you'll cause a lot of issues from occurring later on.
I'm definitely going to circle back to you on the issue of stoppages. I think we have quite a few around the island and the reasons for those stoppages. But I want to now go to Mr. Hausen. Mr. Hausen, we used certain terms in our discussion, and of course, we always keep the understanding of our audience in mind. So we use words such as crown lands, we use words such as road reserve. Can you elaborate on what we really mean when we use those words?
Okay, first, thank you very much again. Well, when we speak of road reserve, so what is designated as a road reserve is, so when someone looks at a road, they would see, but most persons know it to be the tarmac, what the vehicles drive on. But the road reserve is wider than that, it's beyond that. So within that corridor, that space, you have the tarmac, which is where the vehicles commute. You also have a utility zone. Within that utility zone, you have drains, sidewalks, where you have your water, underground water, your cables, your electrical poles. So on either side of the tarmac, the road reserve is that corridor. But within this as well, sometimes you have wider road reserves, which you as the word reserves is spoken of, the reserve is something to be kept and left. So within that road reserve, it's an area where the state can use to have probably things like road widening activities. So that's why the word itself, reserve, says a lot. So also with the crown lands, crown lands are lands that belong to the state. So you have lands that are along the coastal areas where you have the King's Chain, that is owned to the state, which is crown. You also have other lands where the crown owns, where activities like playing fields and parks, those are within the crown, within the remit of the crown as well. So persons hear the term, and for instance, when you hear road reserve, you always ask yourself, is it just the way people drive? But it's more than that. So for instance, I can give you an example. When you drive along the road, most times you see persons have small sheds along the tarmac. All of that most of them belongs to the crown, because the crown normally owns that corridor, and persons actually have things within those areas which they're called road reserves.
Mr. Hausen, I get the impression that when properties, I should say, belong to the crown, a large section of the public also thinks that it belongs to them, it belongs to the citizenry. And this is perhaps a cultural challenge and a misperception that I suspect Mr. Train would like to elaborate on.
When persons realize that there is a space that they can occupy to create some sort of livelihood for themselves, they think that it is okay to just do it and see how they can make some sort of money or try to, extend their capabilities. People believe that it is okay, and they think doing it temporary, as in putting a tent from, let's say, 8 o'clock to 4:30, taking off the tent and going with it, it's okay. Some people believe that because it's a situation where they really are desperate, they will try their best to do it and try to see if they could maintain their livelihood. Nevertheless, we must understand that the property the owner of the property is the state, Crown lands. And therefore, it is important that the persons get permission from Crown lands before they could do those activities. When they do that, by conducting the activity without permission, it creates a further problem. It could cause persons, depending on how close they are to the tarmac, persons may realize that by what they're selling, vehicles will stop right there next to them, create a traffic congestion, and then afterwards, further problems down the line. So we do encourage persons, please seek advice. You can visit the Crown Lands Department, look at the area, and sometimes what would happen is that persons, when they see one person carry out that development, and they see for a couple days, a couple weeks, a couple months, they're doing well, they think that it's okay to come and sit next to them, plan next to them, and carry out the same activity. And that's what happens over a period of time. We tell persons, these things can be hazardous. And you may see it around the city circuit, you may see it around the corridor of Castries to goes there, and even in the south, that sometimes people are right next to the tarmac and people pull up right next to them and traffic congestion, and it creates that situation of possible accidents and incidents because persons want to cross directly in front of where the person is selling to go across the road. And these things create a bigger problem and a bigger situation that the DCA has to handle. So we ask persons and we plead with them, plead with the public, please get permission, seek advice from the Crown Lands Department, whether there's a possibility of doing that activity in that area. Also come to the DCA and find out what is it that they could do for them to be able to carry out their development for their livelihood. Thank you very much.
Is it possible that there have been approvals granted by Crown Lands for persons to establish their businesses? Are you aware that this is being done in certain cases?
Well, with respect to permission from the Crown don't grant approvals. The mandate lies with the DCA. So the DCA is the authorizing agency that grants permission to develop lands. And in so doing, what normally obtains is that if someone knows where Crown property is, what they would do is go to the Commissioner of Crown Lands at the Crown Lands office and have a discussion with the Crown Lands Commissioner or whatever the staff they have housed in the office and ask certain questions. And what the Crown would do, the Crown may give them permission to use their land, or most times the Crown would send them to the DCA. So the Crown would say, submit an application to the DCA and let the DCA determine whether the development you want to put is sound. But the Crown in its own, they don't grant permission. So we're the authorizing agency that grant permission. But the Crown, like any other landowner, can give you permission to develop on the land, but they cannot give you the permission to construct or to do the development.
Okay, I understand that. Yes.
To add to this, just to reiterate to the general public, the Crown will not grant you permission to use or consent to you using the road reserve for any development, because like we said earlier, it's there for a reason. So have a discussion. If you like to use the Crown property for whatever purpose, have that discussion, like Mr. Housen said, with the Crown Land section, and they may be able to guide you accordingly.
Well, I already have you on the floor, Mr. Satney, so I think I might as well keep you there as we take a deep dive into the issue of compliance with land development regulation. I am getting the feeling that there is a challenge with compliance. I would like you to weigh in, and Ms. Augustine, I certainly, invite you to weigh in as well.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. Yes, we do have a perennial issue in this country with land infringement of land development regulations, simply because a lot of people are not aware of what is needed and they don't come to find out. But I want to reiterate that there is legislation in place which will cause you to have which will cause you to ensure that you are compliant with the law, to make sure that your development is compliant and you are doing the right thing. We do have the like I said earlier, the legislation allows us to go in, notice what's happening on the ground with the developments, and to enforce the legislation. The building officers are the ones primarily tasked with that enforcement arm. There may be a situation. There is a situation where we may not maybe have too many officers available, but the officers are on the ground all the time, and they are monitoring, and they do investigate to find out whether this development is authorized or not. For it to be authorized, it must receive approval from the DCA. If it does not receive approval from the DCA, it is completely deemed unauthorized. Once it is unauthorized, you stand the risk of it being fined by the court. You stand the risk of it being demolished completely. All your money have gone to waste if you have not been compliant with the law. So it's important to know the law. It's important to know your requirements and to find out what's happening to ensure that the enforcement and monitoring is continued.
I want to elaborate a little bit on what Mr. Satney is saying. We have had situations where persons have started construction without first having obtained permission from the DCA. And you would see that during the construction activities, they then decide to submit an application. The DCA still has the authority to go in and issue stop and enforcement notices, even though the application has been submitted. The concern here is that the person, one, has not obtained permission yet. You have to complete the process and obtain permission before you decide to start construction. So we do have the authority to go in and issue stop notices while you are constructing, even though the application may be submitted to the DCA. The DCA's role in that instance is to ensure that the application meets the standards, the planning guidance. And once that is done, an approval will be granted. You as the developer are required to be guided by that approval. So even though you have started, you may have started and found yourself in breach of the setbacks, as was mentioned earlier, the densities, the different provisions that you have to be guided by. So we do go in and issue stop and enforcement notices, even though you have submitted the application. The concern here is that you have not obtained permission to build. So this is very important, and persons need to be guided. Before you undertake any development, come to the department and get your guidance. Come to the department and get your permission before you start, so that you undertaking your development, you will not be stopped by the DCA. The officers will come in and they will do the necessary monitoring to ensure that whatever development you are undertaking is according to the approval that has been granted. So again, we encourage persons to come into the department, get the guidance, put in your applications, get your approval before you start development. I'd also like to mention at this time that in obtaining approval, you have other benefits as well. Once you've gone to the financial institutions, you have to present them with your approval. So here it is again. The financial institutions will say to you, for you to be able to obtain a loan or any kind of financing for your project, the first thing they'll ask you, where is the approval from the regulatory authority? So again, we encourage persons to come into the DCA, find out what the requirements are, find out what the building standards are before you undertake any development, before you can even approach your financial institution.
What is the physical location of the DCA? Is there a southern and northern branch?
I would love that. But currently we are located in the Graham Louise building. This is the same building with the Prime Minister's office. The Prime Minister's office is on the top floor, the 5th floor. We at the DCA are located on the 1st floor. Not the ground floor, the 1st floor. So on the ground floor, you have the land registry. On the 1st floor, you have the survey and mapping section, as well as the DCA. So you come into this building and you take the first flight of stairs and you will meet us right there.
On the water.
We are on the waterfront, so we are easily accessible by
And there's
general
adequate
public.
parking.
It's in Castries.
Yes.
There is an office for the department in Viewport, and primarily it is staffed by the Crown Lands staff. However, the DCA is located on the waterfront in Castries.
I want to zero in on Mr. Satney. How many stop and enforcement notices are issued per year?
That's a good one. I don't know offhand the statistics, the number of those that are issued, but there are many. Because, like Mr. Augustine said, a lot of people start the development without planning approval once they've started. Even from clearing the land, you can be served with the stop and enforcement notice. Putting up your columns, you can be served with the enforcement notice. We have this issue around the island. So the number of enforcement notices that are issued are many per year, and what we have is some people, some good people, they do follow the law. Once they have served with the enforcement notice, they do come in and find out what's needed and do comply.
Understood.
And they do stop, because some people want that compliance, because again, they're thinking of the future. Like Mr. Augustine said, some people may need financing later on. So they know they will need it, so they come in. But others may not stop and may not comply. And that is where I come in, to ensure that they do, which is where I now take the matter to the courts, and the court will then compel them to do so. Any infringement of a court order is in contempt of court, and there are higher penalties which can be applied.
Claudia, sorry, if I may add to what Mr. Sadney just said, they are not only granted or given to persons within road reserves or on crown property. You give private persons who own their own land as well. So stop notices are not limited to just someone who put something next on the road reserve or on crown lands. So if you have your own land and you do develop your own land without DCA permission, you are issued a stop notice as well. So persons need to know that. So some persons believe that it is my land, I can build. I can build whatever I want, and that's the notion that most persons have. But it's a simple thing. It's good to, knowledge is power, and persons need to inform themselves, come in. We have an open door policy. Anybody could come in and ask questions, and we are available. So it's a simple thing of just asking questions and understanding what the law entails.
There is this criticism, shall we say, leveled at the department. And sometimes I wonder if Google Earth can help, because of the pace at which certain illegal developments go up. It's almost as if the department is stretched thin trying to keep up. What do you think about this? Do you see repeated behaviors? Perhaps you speak to persons, you engage them today, then you leave, and then 2 weeks later it's back up, maybe 2 yards from the the original location, but back up in the general area, do you face that kind of resistance?
Thank you, Ms. Monley. Wonderful question. And yes, we do. There are some areas in St. Lucia that are challenging to access. You have persons with estates in the inner parts of St. Lucia, around St. Lucia, and the average person may not see that development. Sometimes it's in remote areas where the officer may have to reach at a point where they park their vehicle and have to walk under, over, around for them to see that development. Sometimes it's in a deep gouge in an area that is not very easily accessible. So those developments do take place. But how sometimes we do get to know about some of those developments is through the public themselves, who live in the area and who are aware of those developments and will bring it up to the DCA to come and check it out. And sometimes it may be partly on their property as well, because they are affected by that development. Persons may want to do a trail, they may want to do a sort of development that involves passing on somebody else's property. And the persons that are doing those developments are causing problems for the landowner themselves. So they realize that something is not right. They'll bring it up to the DC, and then we will have to get into those areas. You see those activities happening, and we do carry out the enforcement part of the Physical Plan and Development Act to serve them a notice to stop, to serve them an enforcement notice to comply, and to also invite them to come in and to have a discussion. Despite that, some persons may decide not to give any information or not to even say who they are. Or sometimes they are not even from St. Lucia, sometimes they're overseas. And the officer constantly goes back and forth to ensure that they get some sort of information. In this regard, we do encourage the public to cooperate with the DCA. Sometimes you may know who it is, to help us. And I will always say, and I will categorically say this, when a complaint is made at the DCA, the complainant's name is not mentioned to anybody. It is not divulged to the person on the ground doing the development. It is the right of the DCA. They know the person, but we don't tell the offender who made the complaint, to preserve ourselves, to preserve the DCA, and to preserve the wider public. Because people may get agitated, they may be aggressive, and it may cause some sort of harm where we do have to call the police. Now, there are areas of contention.
Yeah, we may have to stick a pin at this point as unbelievable as it is, our time is winding down. And so I would like to thank everybody for being here. And to our viewers, we thank you very much for watching, Miss Augustine.
Definitely.
It was a pleasure. And of course, just quickly reiterate when the cleanup and removal campaign will begin.
We are aiming to start the activity on the 29th of September, and this will go on for approximately 2 weeks. We are taking this opportunity to remind the public that to expect us, we will be out in the various communities undertaking this cleanup campaign. So if you know that you are one of those persons who have been served abatement notices by the DCA or notice to vacate by the Crown, please be mindful that we will be on the ground undertaking this activity. So if you are one of those persons, please remove your belongings from those properties, because we will be removing those structures and disposing of them. So this is your opportunity to, before we reach, remove your activities, remove your structures, clear up the site before we engage.
Thank you so much, Mr. Augustine. It has been a pleasure having you all. You have been watching Nation Beat. I am Claudia Monlui, saying goodbye for now.
The panel, the discussion, an objective and impartial view of the issues of interest to you. Nation Beat is on now.